Why hello there, and welcome back to Some Weirdo on the Internet Reviews Obscure Role-Playing Games. It is another hands video, and that can only mean one thing. I have a physical product to review. And that physical product is... Wet Grandpa. This was sent to me by Melsonian Arts Council, and is, let's just say, a system-agnostic D20 adventure. Things I will comment on later. So, what is Wet Grandpa? Basically, what we have here is, as an adventure-ish thing, in which the players may acquire a map with the promise of treasure. And also the warning that nobody has made it back alive after pursuing said treasure. And that is what this is, an adventure where you go up the river, encounter a fishing village, and perhaps some treasure of some varieties. Unfortunately, with adventures, there's only so much I can say without getting into spoiler territory, so I am going to get into spoiler territory now. If you do not want spoilers, skip to the timestamp, which I'm going to put on screen around here somewhere. And that will not give you spoilers if you are interested in playing this adventure rather than running it. But if you are interested in running it, I am now going to get into the spoilery territory of Wet Grandpa. Alright, now that all the nerds are gone, let's get into this. So, as I said, it's a fairly straightforward, there's treasure somewhere, why don't you go looking for it? But the interesting part about it is... the town of Fatfish, which is the first place that you come across upriver, which is a mostly abandoned fishing village. And man, this adventure is kind of depressing because it just goes into depth on the few remaining people in this fishing village and basically how terrible their lives are and the meager items that they have on hand. For example, the Quinn household has a few basic cooking implements, a silver and porcelain tea set, a large box of tea leaves, and 20 pounds of rolled oats. That's your treasure. If you decide to loot their house, which, I don't know, you probably will because you're a horrible person. And a history of the fatfish. And then the Mudwater Naiads, which this is where things get a little weird. Here is the island where you will encounter the titular Wet Grandpa, essentially the character Jedlin, as it goes into earlier. Yeah. Explains in the beginning here, the character Jedlin and his wife were an old couple that decided to adopt a lot of orphan children and raise them on an island, and they were grandpa and grandma, and then grandma died, and then grandpa drowned in the river, but then I guess he got better. He just kind of crawled out of the river and was like, well, back to work, and now he is Wet Grandpa. He is Wet Grandpa. That's what Wet Grandpa is. I probably should have explained that at some point earlier in this. It is an undead river elemental old man. It's kind of complicated what he is, but I had to explain that part. Before I got to, we have the Mudwater Naiads, who are the ones who hold the treasure. So, we get information on the Naiads. There are 4 different Mudwater Naiads for winter, spring, summer, and autumn. They have, we got lots of information on them. Things that will happen if their chains are broken, if all their chains are broken, what effect things will have, etc., etc. And then information on the treasury itself, where they are. So one little critique here is, I feel like it doesn't adequately explain how you get here, because according to this map, it seems that the little treasury is in the river, and it doesn't really explain. It says there are stairs going down to it, but not quite where those stairs are entered from. But anyway, that's just a small little thing. So we have attributes for all of the Naiads, and stats for Jedlin, the titular Wet Grandpa, because you can fight him and probably should, although this is another issue I have with this particular thing is, if we look at what the information they give us on Jedlin, they describe him as being this odd, creature with blue skin and watery brown blood that doesn't drip, but it also says that he is slow to anger and only wants for his kids to do well, to be happy, and maybe do a spot of line fishing. There is nothing here that suggests that you should really want to kill him. It does suggest that the naiads who one would presume are the actual, boss of this encounter, they seem to be concerned by the growth of Jedlin's power and madness, but, do you want to take their word for it? Because that's the thing, is the only real indication for why you should fight him is the word of Mudwater Naiads. But, it seems like you are supposed to do that because on the opposite page of them saying he just wants his kids to do well and to be happy, there's a whole list of the things that will happen if he remains undefeated. And, in 3 years, he basically becomes a demigod, and it is not good. So that is a complaint I have about this. But then after that, we have stats for all of the kids, and the encounter chart for things that might encounter on your river travels. So that is what the content is in this book. But now let us welcome back the people who skipped the spoilery section and get back into this and take a look at the actual book here. So, as you can tell looking at the cover, somewhat strange graphic design choices, and even more strange, this exposed threaded binding, which we can see here is visible on the inside too, which is odd, and that is how I describe the overall design of this book. The graphics are a little rough, the layout feels a bit odd, you have this bizarre binding, and it just feels not 100% right. Something seems just off about this book. Aside from the content it contains, just looking at it is a little uncomfortable in a way that I can't properly explain. I assume it is intentional, this colored outline on this text. That looks horrible. But in this context, it's just another thing that makes the book feel weird. It's not a book you're supposed to be looking at. It feels like something that you found tucked away in a secret drawer somewhere in a weird curio shop. And I feel like that's what they were going for. I think that was intended design choices for this book. So, that was Wet Grandpa. I'm not in love with the concept of a system-agnostic D20 adventure. For one thing, it does just kind of give you a location. It gives you a reason to go to the location and the location, but then nothing else. So you definitely have to do most of the work yourself, and it's verging on the point where I have to question, if I have to do 60% of the work, why don't I do 100% of the work? Also, as a system-agnostic D20 game, it's a little confusing, because I don't know what system to run this in. For example, we have attributes here. Wet Jedlin has 3 hit die, AC as baseline, and attack 1. I don't know what those numbers mean. I am familiar with lots of games, and I might have seen one that those make sense in, but off the top of my head, I do not know. If they had said for old school essentials, or for swords and wizardry, or whatever, if they had said for a specific game, this wouldn't be an issue, but it feels like people want to say the product is system agnostic when it's not really system agnostic. It'll work with multiple systems, but there is one that it was intended for. But then, for what it is, it is really good. As I stated previously, the tone of it is so depressing and uncomfortable in a very well thought out way. It is that sort of beautiful grotesqueness that exists in the sort of out there things like this. It's not really a fun adventure. It's one that makes you possibly not feel great. And I think that's what they were going for, and I think they did a good job executing that. And as I also just said, they did a very good job executing that in the overall design of the book. It just feels weird. There's something about this book that makes me feel slightly uncomfortable in a very good way. And that is it for Wet Grandpa. And thank you for watching, with an extra special thanks to my Fightin' Flail Snails, Samuel Gorski and Randy Mulholland. If you'd like to be cool like them, check out my Patreon, where you can get early access to videos and fun stuff that I make for the Patreon. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine too. You can still hit all the lovely buttons, like, subscribe, these other videos that YouTube or I have selected for you, and I am sure are lovely videos that you will also enjoy. And I will see you next time.